What's going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut, live for Heartland Sports. Today is going to be part two of our NFL series here with who my favorite NFL players are on each team. If you didn't see it back on Thursday, I recorded part one, which is the AFC. What I do is I'm doing one player on each team's offense and one player on each team's defense. So, yeah, that's pretty much just going to be the premise of it. Now, I'm going to do each team in alphabetical order by the city or location, I should say, in which they play. Now, I'm going to do the Eagles last just because it's the Eagles, and yeah. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right into it, and we're going to start off with the Arizona Cardinals. So, my favorite player on their offense is Larry Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald's been a class act for a long time. He's been in the NFL for a long time, and he's always just been a good player. He's been an Eagle killer. Yes, he has. He basically single-handedly carried his team to the Super Bowl over the Eagles back in the 2008-2009 season. He was actually like a ball boy or something or another. I forget exactly what it was, but he had some connection with the Vikings at one point, which is always cool. And he was actually almost traded to the Eagles at one point as well. So again, that's something that's pretty cool. He's always been a big fixture in the community. He has a couple of fun foundations and all that good stuff. Like that. What's Larry Fitzgerald First Down Fund? I'm pretty sure is what it's called. It's one of them. So it's pretty cool, and he has all these records, obviously. So it's pretty dang cool. This guy's just always been around. I hope he gets to be, a Hall of Famer. Well, let me rephrase that. I hope he gets to win a Super Bowl. I know he's a Hall of Famer, but the question is he gonna, actually win a Super Bowl? I don't know. I don't think it's gonna happen. I don't have much confidence in the Arizona Cardinals right now, and he's up there in age. That's the problem. Then we get to defense, where I'm going with cornerback Patrick Peterson. Peterson's a guy who, he's been around the league again for a little while, and he's just a guy who's a good player. He's always been a good player. He's always been competitive. I always like it when a player other than a running back, an occasional receiver, takes kickoffs and punt returns, and that's what Peterson's been doing. Peterson's always been one of the top prospects. Yeah, he's getting older. Yeah, he's starting to get beat here and there, on a lot more plays than he used to, but still, it's pretty cool. He's been around for a little bit, and he's just a good player. He's an all-around good player. When you get to the Atlanta Falcons next, now for offense, I was choosing between two players, and I was really torn, but I'm gonna go with quarterback Matt Ryan. Ryan's a guy who is a definite Hall of Famer, and I remember I was really rooting for him in Super Bowl 51, but unfortunately things didn't work out, as you all know. They blew that 28-3. Especially living in New England, that's all I heard for a whole year, and it was just heartbreaking. Because I worked with a Falcons fan at that time. Matt Ryan's just one of the best quarterbacks. Obviously, he's getting overshadowed by the fact that he's playing in this era with all these amazing quarterbacks. Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning towards the end of Manning's career. Obviously Brady, Brees, all these great quarterbacks are just overshadowing him. Eli Manning, you could say, Philip Rivers, even Ben Roethlisberger. I could keep going for a little bit, but Matt Ryan's just a great player, and I hope he can win a Super Bowl, but it's not going to happen in Atlanta right now. That team's in a complete rebuild. Speaking of rebuild, they got rid of pretty much everyone I liked on their defense, so I'm left with cornerback Bleedy Ray Wilson as my favorite player, and he's been a bust since he was drafted in the NFL. I think he went in the second round to the Titans, and he hasn't been that good, but fact is, he went to UConn, and that's pretty much the best thing I can say about him. He went to UConn, and that's the best thing on that defense to me. Moving on, we got the Carolina Panthers. Now for offense, I went with running back Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey basically carried my fantasy team last season before everyone else on my team got hurt. Christian McCaffrey's been a big name player. He's the best pass catching running back in the NFL. I love pass catching running backs, especially in today's league, obviously. Saquon's very good up there too, but Saquon, hasn't played as much. You also have someone like Darren Sproles. He just retired. He was a great pass catching running back. Bilal Powell's up there too, but Christian McCaffrey just, he makes you miss. He makes you pay. He's not afraid to, take a hit to make the extra 2 yard carry. I love that as a player in a player. So a guy who can catch the ball and actually run and isn't afraid to take a hit and deliver a hit too. On defense, I went with defensive tackle Quan Short. Now, defensive tackle is a position that I value more than other people value it, just because I'm an Eagles fan, so I've seen, this is what happens when you invest in the defensive tackle position. So, yeah, I know a lot of people probably don't really care about defensive tackles unless they're defensive tackles and Aaron Donald. I get it. Quan Short's not the best name, but he's a good player. Solid player. Then we get to the Chicago Bears. Easiest pick by far for me in this. Quarterback Nick Foles. Come on. You guys know I'm an Eagles fan. Nick Foles, drafted 88th overall in 2012 by the Eagles. We all know his story. After 3 years, he goes to he gets traded to the Rams, then he goes to the Chiefs, then he comes back to the Eagles, wins the Super Bowl. Philly special. We all know the story. I'm not going to go too much into it. Very well might be a player bio on him in the future if that's something that you guys are interested. I definitely would love to do a player bio on Nick Foles just because his story is so interesting. But he wouldn't be the top of my list just because, I don't want to keep boring you guys with going with, Eagles this, Philadelphia that. This is all sports, so I don't want to just bore you guys with the Eagles, obviously. Going out of defense, I'm going with linebacker Khalil Mack. I mentioned before on my last video, the AFC video, that I have a good buddy who's a huge fan of the Raiders. And, he was heartbroken when they traded Khalil Mack to the Bears, and I don't blame him. Khalil Mack's a great player. I love Khalil Mack, and he does everything. He does what he has to. Khalil Mack, he's getting towards 30 at this point. He's 29, almost 30 if he hasn't hit 30 already. So that's a little concerning if I'm a Bears fan. But the fact is, this guy's still such a dominant force. Give him 2 more years, and he's a Hall of Famer if he can keep it up. And we get to my least favorite team, one of my least favorite teams in the NFL. I'm going to make this short, sweet, and to the point. Dallas Cowboys offense, running back Tony Pollard, went to Memphis. He's a very elusive back. He can catch passes when he has to. I liked him coming out of college, and I was going to root for him no matter where he went. He really got tested. He's really tested me by being on Dallas, but I'm still rooting for him. On defense, safety, Clinton Dix, best name in the league. First name, come on, man. You can't beat that. But other than that, he's definitely a good safety. Was he worth the first round pick the Packers spent on him? Probably. Maybe not. Probably. So, good pick, but a guy I wish he wasn't in Dallas, but I like him. Then we get to the Detroit Lions. On offense, I went with tight end TJ Hawkinson. Now, Hawkinson's a guy who, just like in my last video, I was discussing Mike Gesicki. He's very similar to Gesicki, except even more talented. He's a guy who has more potential than Mike Gesicki. They're both young receivers. Gesicki has a lower ceiling than Hawkinson, though. So Hawkinson's a guy, if I'm building a franchise from scratch, I'm trying to get Hawkinson over Gesicki. But I would be happy with Gesicki too. But I'm not going to compare the two of them too much. Hawkinson's should have a good season. If you guys do fantasy, I would definitely look at TJ Hawkinson, because if Matthew Stafford comes back and he's healthy, he's going to have a good target for the first time since Calvin Johnson retired. And, Marvin Jones is here and there, but, Calvin Johnson was a different thing. Hawkinson, I'm not comparing him to Calvin Johnson, but he's still a very good option. On defense, I went with, speaking about the Atlanta Falcons, I went with the former Falcon cornerback, Desmond Trufant. They just cut him. I think he was on their team for 7 years, and he was an elite cornerback. His plays kind of dipped in recent years, but when you get older, that happens, so you can't really hold that against him. Desmond Trufant, the best part about Trufant is when he signed with the Lions, it became apparent, okay, they're not going to have him and Darius Slay. So Darius Slay gets straight to the Eagles. So, that's great. That's always good news for me. Trufant, I hope he ends up getting a Super Bowl ring at some point because he's a great player, but he's not like elite, so he's not going to be in the Hall of Fame. But he was close, like Matt Ryan. He was close, but moving on, so I don't upset all the Falcons fans out there. We got the Green Bay Packers. So on offense, I went with wide receiver Allen Lazard. Now Lazard's he's kind of growing. Not a lot of people know his story though, so I'll do a real brief summary of it. He basically, in high school he wasn't a big name, and he kind of, he commits to the Iowa State for football, college football. His dad had played at Iowa State, so he ends up breaking out his junior and senior years in high school, and he ends up basically he follows in his dad's footsteps. He gets offers from Notre Dame, Stanford. I think Cal offered him a contract. If not, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And he stayed at Iowa State because, his dad played there and he had committed to them early. No one would have blamed him if he left, but he stayed. So that made everybody, that just showed his loyalty. He plays all 4 years at Iowa State, smaller name school, but he ends up, torching my Memphis Tigers in the Liberty Bowl. I remember that. That's where I learned the guy's name. He goes undrafted, signs with the Jaguars, and then, he gets cut. He ends up going to the Packers in 2018 after they had a bunch of injuries, and he's been a mainstay since. So Allen Lazard's just a guy I like to root for, despite the fact that he toasted my Memphis Tigers. But I can't hold that against him. The man wanted a ring, or a championship, I should say. After that, we have defense, and I went with another Eagles legend, just like Nick Foles, except lesser known, Trayvon Hester, defensive end. Hester's the guy who, if you watch the 2018-19 playoffs Eagles-Bears game, you saw the double doink. You probably have definitely seen the double doink. Trayvon Hester's the man who blocked it. I remember he posted a picture right after the game on his Instagram, and you saw his finger was all messed up. Yeah, he blocked the kick, so he made that play. He etched himself into Philadelphia history, and he all but ended Cody Parkey's career. Another former Eagle. Go to the LA Rams next. So on offense, I said wide receiver Josh Reynolds. Reynolds is a good guy. He's not the best player in the league, don't get me wrong. He's not the best receiver on his team, but he stepped up admirably when Brandon Cooks went down yet again with a concussion last year. So, I respect that. He's a good slot receiver. Is he going to etch his name in the record books? Probably not. But he's still a good player, and I like rooting for good players. I like the guy. One of my favorite Eagles all time is Jason Avant, and he's basically one of the players that goes out. He makes the catch. He's not going to do anything special. He's just constantly catching the passes. That's what Reynolds does, from what I've seen. On defense, I went with defensive tackle Aaron Donald. Can't go wrong with him. He's the best defensive tackle in the game. Very, very, very elite talent. So, yeah, I never had a problem with Aaron Donald, except when he, just dominates teams that I like. But, I hope he gets a Super Bowl ring. He is getting up there in age, And when I say that, I mean, near 30. Because you don't know. Once these athletes hit 30, sometimes, the simplest thing ends up being a career ender for him. After the Rams, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota is one of my favorite teams, too. Them and the Bills, I think I mentioned this in my AFC video. I have them as like 1 or 2A and 2B. I like them both. I don't know which one I like more. I'd have to have them play against each other in a game that, matters for both teams. And wouldn't affect the Eagles, because if it affects the Eagles, I'm going to root for the team that would help the Eagles if they win. But Minnesota, I went with Chad Beebe on offense. He's a wide receiver, just like his dad was. If you know the name Beebe, it's probably because of Don Beebe. If in one of the Super Bowls, because he was on the Bills Super Bowl teams, I think he was on all four of them. If he wasn't, he was on three of them, and he got to see, he was the player who, when Leon Lett made that fumble recovery of the Cowboys, he's the player who tracked down Leon Lett and knocked the ball out of his hands, forcing a touchback, rather than, the Cowboys getting a touchdown. And it was a blowout game, too, in the Cowboys' favor. So it just showed a lot of hustle. His son, Chad, he's not the same player, undrafted free agent. He's kind of hung around the Vikings. But, hopefully he can do good. Hopefully he starts doing better. Fingers crossed for him. On defense, I went with linebacker Eric Kendricks. Yes, he is the younger brother of former Eagles Super Bowl 52 starting linebacker Michael Kendricks, who's currently being investigated for insider trading charges. He's looking at jail time for that if he hasn't already had it happen. His trial keeps getting pushed back. But this isn't about Michael, this is about Eric. He's a good player. He's definitely the better of the two Kendrick brothers. He's just a good, solid linebacker. I was really choosing between him and Anthony Barr. I like him and Anthony Barr. So I would have been fine. I could have said the same. I could have talked about Anthony Barr too here, but I went with Kendricks. He's just, in my view, he's the better linebacker of the two. But, he's going to get better stats just because he's an inside linebacker versus outside. But it's still, I wouldn't want to play against either one of them. Then we have the New Orleans Saints. So I went with quarterback Drew Brees. The guy's a class act. I'm not going to talk about what happened in this past week, but the guy is a class act. He definitely, interesting thing about him, I don't know if you guys know this, but he did go to the same high school. He went to the high school first, and Foles followed him. So he went to the same high school as Nick Foles. That he's basically the reason why Nick Foles wears number 9. He idolizes Drew Brees. So if Nick Foles likes him, I like him. On defense, I went with cornerback Patrick Robinson. Before you ask, yes, I am a Malcolm Jenkins on that team. I just like Robinson a little better. He made the pick 6 in the in the NFC Championship game against the Vikings. So I like that. I'm always happy about that. That play all but changed the game, the series, the outcome, everything you want to say. So Robinson, Jenkins made a lot of plays too, but Robinson's the one that basically helped convert one of my friends who was doesn't really know much about sports, but the pick 6 basically helped him become an Eagles fan. He doesn't necessarily follow football at all. He's a complete bandwagon fan who only follow when the Eagles are in the playoffs and only follow the playoffs. But fact of the matter is it made him like the Eagles. So then we go to the New York Giants offense. Running back Saquon Barkley. What's not to like about Saquon? This guy's just an amazing running back. I would say the second best running back in the game, just behind McCaffrey. Very good player. Very, very good player. Love him as a player. So, on defense, I went with safety Jabril Peppers. So, when he was getting recruited to college, I was really interested in, recruiting for college football. So, I remember watching and seeing, okay, hey, yeah, this guy named Jabril Peppers just signed with the Memphis Wolverines, and I was so excited. He was listed as a athlete, so I was like, what the heck, what does it mean he's listed as an athlete? So I look it up, and it just means, yeah, this guy's basically he can play any position that they want him to. So he basically could play what he ends up doing is he's like a kick returner, punt returner. He plays defense. He's a corner and a safety. He plays linebacker. He plays receiver. He does some running back. Not a lot, but he does do some running back. So it's just kind of cool, a Swiss Army knife. Next, I will do the Eagles last, like I said. Next is the San Francisco 49ers. So on offense, I went with fullback Kyle Juszczyk. So Juszczyk is a guy who, he's been around the league, and he's one of the last, if not the last, true fullback in the NFL. And, I just like watching fullbacks play. It's a part of the game that's just going ever so slowly, unfortunately. So Juszczyk's definitely a guy I like. And the fun part about Juszczyk is if you go to any casual NFL fan and say, how do you pronounce this guy's name? If they know it and you ask them how do you spell it, no one's going to know. I don't even know. I know it starts with a J. I know there's a Z or a couple Z's in there, but I don't know how to spell it. On defense, I mentioned this guy's brother in our last video, the AFC video. Defensive end Nick Bosa. Now, I do like Nick more than Joey, but Nick Bosa is just, I think Nick Bosa is going to be the face of the 49ers in a year, if he isn't already. See, I live on the East Coast, so I don't know how many people are talking about it, but he's a very good player. I always like him. I've always liked him. Yeah, he went to Ohio State, and I was like, Ohio State. Why'd he go to Ohio State? But then, I started watching him play. I'm like, oh, this guy's got good potential. Of course, it winds up that this guy stops caring and doesn't go to some of the games or whatever. It, has injuries or whatever you want to say. That's fine. Whatever. I don't care enough, It's college. He's caring about his NFL future. College wasn't playing, they're not paying their players at that time, so I get it. Um, Going to Seattle, I went for offense, tight end Will Dissly. Dissly's a guy who, he's dealt with injuries, unfortunately. Never fun, but hopefully he gets healthy. Hopefully he stays healthy. They did just draft a tight end in Parkinson in the fourth round, so hopefully that doesn't affect him too much. On defense, went with linebacker Shaquem Griffin. He's the guy who went to Central Florida, UCF. The undefeated national champs that one year, and he's the brother who doesn't have a hand. So it's pretty cool, I remember watching the pro day highlights when he was wearing the prosthetic hand. Kind of cool. I would have been fine with his brother too, but I might as well go with the one that everybody likes the story of. We get to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So for offense, I went with wide receiver Mike Evans. So Mike Evans is a guy who I've just always kind of liked. He always seems to fall to me in my fantasy football leagues every year. So I've gotten to know him. He's more boomer bust. But part of that could be just the fact that Jameis Winston was his quarterback. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, will he keep falling? Probably not. Probably not. On defense, I went with linebacker Levante David. So I remember, funny story, when he got drafted, I remember thinking that they meant David Levante, because I'm like, who the heck is Levante David? I thought they messed up his name. Obviously they didn't, and this guy's one of the better linebackers in the league. He's in the 30, 31-year-old range at this point. He's a good player. He's always been a solid tackler. He's been struggling to stay healthy in recent years, but he's still a very, very good linebacker. The only positive about Patriots, or the Buccaneers getting Brady and Gronkowski is maybe Levante David will actually have a shot at getting a Super Bowl. Him and Mike Evans, but we'll see. Then we get to the Washington Redskins. So on offense, I went with running back Darius Guice. Guice is a guy who, again, just like Will Dissly, has dealt with numerous injuries. He's only been in the league for 2 years, and he's just been completely decimated by injuries. I'm trying to remember. He's played, I think, 5 games in his career, 6 games in his career. And, as a rookie, he tears his ACL before the season even starts. And he ends up early on, week 1 in 2019, he ends up leaving the game against the Eagles with an injury again to his knee. I think it was a torn meniscus. So he ends up coming back later in the season, and he ends up spraining his meniscus again, or an MCL. He ends up spraining his ACL, MCL. He ends up spraining, I think it was the MCL. And it's just kind of sad to see this guy. He's so young, he's so talented. He's already had 3 major knee injuries. So hopefully he can continue. If not, life goes on. But then we have on defense, I went with defensive end Ryan Kerrigan. So for those of you wondering, yes, Kerrigan, he is a defensive end. He's also a linebacker. He's been with the Redskins for a while, so I like him as well. He's a very good player. He's always around the field. He's making plays. He gets sacks. He gets tackles for loss. He gets tackles. He's always around. He does good in coverage. He does it all. He's just a defensive end now because he's getting a little older, and he They run a 4-3 now, I'm pretty sure, instead of a 3-4. So, last but not least, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. So, I went with a little bit more special kind of thing, and I went with 3 players instead of 2. 2 on offense and 1 on defense. I was going to go with 6, and I'm like, you know what? When we did favorite players before and we mentioned our teams, our favorite teams, we went with 3, so I'm going to stick with the number 3. So, obviously, I went with my quarterback, Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is my quarterback. Love the guy. I have 2 Eagles jerseys, and he is one of them. Carson Wentz is just, he deserved the MVP award in 2017, but he tore his ACL and LCL. As you all know, against the Rams. He's looked very good. He had a very good season last year. The first Eagles quarterback in franchise history to pass for 4,000 yards, despite the fact that he didn't have a single wide receiver get over 500 yards. So that's a record season right there for him. I'm excited for his future if he can stay healthy. Jadeveon Clowney got away with that dirty, disgusting hit, and I think that's why he's not on the Eagles right now. I think if Clowney wouldn't have done that dirty hit and then acted the way he did, he'd be on the Eagles right now. But he didn't, but anyway, I'm going to go with my defensive guy real quick. Defensive tackle Fletcher Cox. Best defensive tackle in the game behind Aaron Donald. I remember when the Eagles drafted Fletcher Cox, I had a algebra class with a buddy of mine who was also an Eagles fan, and he goes up to me and we're talking, and he's like, dude, I can't believe we passed on Stephon Gilmore, or I was hoping we'd get Stephon Gilmore, but instead we got Fletcher Cox. I'm like, dude, Fletcher Cox is an even better player. At the time, the Eagles definitely needed a corner, but they also needed a defensive tackle, and it's Andy Reid era at that point, so he heavily values the lines. So it made sense that he went with Fletcher Cox. They traded up with Seattle to get Cox, and basically from when they got him, he's just been such a good player. The guy is a leader. There's that whole controversy in the Saints playoff game last year where 2018-19, I should say, where they apparently ran that trick play at him because they know he doesn't care on special teams or whatever. Whatever. He shouldn't even be on the field in special teams. He should be getting a breather. That's my opinion, but Fletcher Cox is my favorite defensive player for the Eagles. Now, the third guy, and then my last favorite player here in the NFL, is running back Boston Scott. Now, Boston Scott's a guy who, nobody knew who he was at this point a year ago. He was just some no-name who had been drafted by the Saints, cut by the Saints, went to the Eagles practice squad, got called up. And that's true. But, I knew who he was. I liked him coming out of Louisiana Tech. I was a big fan of him. I become attached to certain players like mid-round running backs or receivers and all that. Don't ask me why. And he happened to be one of them. He went to the Saints. I'm like, okay, cool. And he gets cut. And then the Eagles, like I said, end up signing him. And I was very excited. And I remember I told one of my friends, I'm like, yeah, Boston Scott's good. And nothing happened. So then 2019 comes around. Again, he gets cut by the Eagles, goes on the practice squad. I was nervous when they cut him, someone was going to claim him. Him and Greg Ward Jr. Greg Ward Jr. would have been my fourth choice. But, I was nervous for the two of them. They both end up on the practice squad. And Boston Scott, as we know, just dominated the end of the regular season for the Eagles when Jordan Howard was out and Miles Sanders was, iffy. So it was very exciting to see this guy. I hope he's still good. I hope the sky's the limit for him. I think he's a very, very good guy. I think he's going to be Darren Sproles 2.0 for the Eagles, and that's really high praise because I love Darren Sproles. But yeah, that's going to do it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If it's something that interests you, definitely feel free to like and subscribe. This will be our last video doing something like favorite athletes. I know Patrick was talking about potentially doing a short video of his favorite NBA players. I have no interest in that, but that's just me. I'm not a big fan of basketball. But we do have videos coming out daily for the time being. I don't know what's coming out tomorrow, Sunday, June 7th, but we will get things going. Don't worry. Hopefully this video is up by the end of the 6th. Of course, on Monday, I will be doing my Mike Trout video, so you guys definitely should tune into that one. It's going to be a nice video discussing all the players drafted before Mike Trout. And this upcoming Friday, I will be doing a history of video regarding either the Detroit Tigers or the Chicago White Sox, depending on how things go. Definitely would recommend listening to that. If you haven't already, look at our history of videos. We have 2 up currently. They're about the Boston Bruins in the NHL and the Minnesota Twins in the Major League Baseball. So again, if that's something that interests you guys, definitely would recommend it. We do a lot of research on those videos, and they take a lot of time to get the research and facts about. So definitely feel free, if you like them, let me know, please. All your comments are appreciated. Anything that you say, we will respond to at this point. Thank you very much. Eric out. Have a great rest of your day, guys.